All right, I will say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking all, of our sponsors for this morning's share. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Kislev, Haba Aleinu L'Tova. Allison and Adam Steinmetz for dedicating all the Shir and Drushos this month in memory of Adam's grandfather, Rabbi Sheldon Steinmetz, Harav Shlomo Tzvi Ruvain Ben Shimon, Zichron Livracha. And in honor that his Neshama should have an Aliyah, and he should be a Meilis Yosef for his children, his grandchildren. I'll tell you something beautiful. Adam WhatsApped me yesterday to update the sponsorship. It was 34, and now Kenai Nahara 35 great-grandchildren. Baruch Hashem, you see, and the Neshama continues to accrue tremendous zechuyos even when it's no longer in this world. Sammy and Malka Esterson for dedicating all the Shirman Drashos this month in memory of their parents, Yitzchak Leib ben Aaron HaKohen, Sarah Rachel Bas Baruch Avram, Hinda Bas Henech Ephraim, and in memory of their dear family friend, Staff Sergeant Naftali Yonah Gordon Hashem Yikom Damo, fell in Gaza on Erev Chanukah in 2023. Paul and Kathy Pollack for dedicating Shurim and Drushos this month in memory of Paul's Mishpacha, Leah Bas Shmuel, Zachrini Shulamis Bas Shmuel, and Esther Bas Zacharia. Our Daf Yomi sponsors for today, Ayala and Sarah Steinberg, in the schos of continued health and refuah for Shulamis Chana Bas Susha and Jacob and Julie Blumenfeld in memory of Julie's grandfather, Harav Zacharia ben Harav Aryeh Leib Zichron Libracha, on the occasion of his 25th yahrzeit. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the neshamas will have an aliyah, the families ein nechama, all those who need a refuah shevan together with kol cholei Yisrael and Kadosh Baruch Hu Shedem Yeretz Hashem shower brachas and besoros tovos upon Am Yisrael. With that, let us begin. We have a lot to do today. Today's daf is Pei Aleph, a really exciting daf. Just everything is exciting this morning, right? Very exciting daf ahead of us today as well. We left off yesterday on Pei Amud Beis at Tashma, the last Tashma actually, which is 2, 4, 6, 7 lines up from the bottom. So for both of you, remember again, we are in the midst of nothing less than a dramatic machlokes about para aduma waters. So remember again, what was the case that we had in yesterday's daf? You have a flask of para aduma water. People carry around all different kinds of flasks, right? This is a flask of para aduma water. What ends up happening over here? Some regular water gets mixed into the para aduma water. What is the impact on that? So remember again, Rabbi Eliezer says, no problem, just sprinkle twice. Just sprinkle twice and you are good to go. Chachamim say it's totally puzzle. Now both say, if you remember again, so the idea over here is the Rabbanon were pretty easy to understand, right? Why? Because what was the position of the Rabbanon? It was really made up of 3 parts. Number 1, yesh bila. What does yesh bila mean? That when liquids mix, they fully and comprehensively mix together. That's number 1. Number 2 is, and therefore, haza'at tzricha shir. There is a requisite amount of water that needs to be sprinkled for the para aduma. And number 3, ultimately again, shir ve'imitztarfen azos. And independent sprinklings do not combine to form the composite or the collective amount necessary for sprinkling. So when you put that all together, that makes sense. According to the Chachamim, once regular water gets mixed in with paraduma water, the whole thing is invalid. Okay, but now the Gemara said, but what's the pshat with Rabbi Eliezer? What is this 2 sprinklings? I don't understand. Why does 2 sprinklings work if one is not going to work? So again, that was a 3-way machlokes in Reish Lakish, Rava, and Rav Ashi. So the Gemara really seized upon the position of Rav Ashi a lot, right? Because Rav Ashi ultimately said that ein bila. Ultimately, again, there's no bila, which means that liquids do not comprehensively mix. Therefore, do 2 hazos, 2 sprinklings, and you're good to go. The Gemara then really kind of tore into Rav Ashi and kept challenging him. So that's where we left off yesterday. 2 more challenges to Rav Ashi before we finish this up. Tashma, hanitanim matana achas, shenis arva benitanim matana achas. This is our Mishnah, right? Again, I will say this is the mixture of sacrificial blood. So let's say if you have 1 application blood that gets mixed in with other 1 application blood, what's the halacha? Yinatnu b'matana achas. Okay, so do a blood application and you're good to go. The amrit ein bila, but if you say ein bila, like Rav Ashi said, right? If you say in bila that the liquids don't mix together, then what does 1 application do for you? Dilma mehai kayav and mehai lo kayav. Maybe because you're only doing one application, you end up applying one of the bloods and not the other. Krish the Gemara says kigon shinis arva achas ba'achas. So we'll say, so if you remember again, the Gemara said this is the answer the Gemara kept giving, that really you have a 1-to-1 ratio mixture, and therefore if you end up doing one application from each of the bloods, right? Then ultimately, again, you end up hitting both that are contained within the mixture. Okay, matan arba, matan arba. So again, these are all just questions that are lobbed at Rav Ashi. Matan arba, matan arba. Next case, remember again, you have a 4-application blood that is mixed in with another 4-application blood. So again, hachanami shinis arvu arba ba'arba. What's the case? Where again, it's a 4-to-4 ratio measurement. Therefore, once we do the application, you ensure that everything gets placed in the mizbeach. Matan arba, matan achos. What about a 4-application blood mixed together with a 1-application blood? Top of pei aleph. V'chi tema 81a. V'chi tema hachanami benes ariv aba achos. See if you say again that over here it only got mixed in with one measure of 1 application blood. The Gemara says, "Ihachi amar lo Rabbi Yoshua harehu over abal tosif." Rabbi Yoshua said the problem is, if you remember, this is Rabbi Yoshua's answer back to Rabbi Eliezer. Yes, in the Mishnah, how can you do 4 applications? After all, halacha lemaisa, it's bal tosif. But if there's only one measure of the 1 application blood, then what bal tosif is there? The Gemara says, "Bal tosif hey mehecha." Rava says, rather Rava say, Rava reframes this whole thing, right? Rava reframes this entire conversation. And Rava says, in reality, bebalul lo pligi. They're really not arguing about yesh bila, ein bila. That's not what they're arguing about. The Gemara says, ki pligi, bekosos. In other words, they're arguing about, say, because remember, yesh bila or ein bila really only applies when the blood itself is mixed together. Rav Ashi wants to suggest, what's their machlokes? Their machlokes is where cups get, in other words, you have individual cups that get mixed together. Rabbi Eliezer, Islay Rowan, the Rabbanon, Leslay Rowan. So we'll say, remember again, we had this in the Mishnah. Rabbi Eliezer subscribes to the concept of Rowan. Now we'll say, what's Rowan? So remember where this came up? This came up in a case where, let's say you have sacrificial blood, what we called lamala and lamata blood that got mixed together, right? So let's say, we're going to both say, which carbon is offered up? Lamala. Which carbon? Lamala. Chatos, right? Everything else pretty much is lamata, right? So let's say you have lamala and lamata blood mixed together. So what Rabbi would say? No problem. Do the application lamala and then do the application lamata. What about the fact that you're putting the wrong blood in the wrong place? Rabbi Eliezer said rowan. Both American, what's rowan? We view, let's say when you're doing the blood application lamala, we view any lamata blood as if it's water. As if it's water. And vice versa, when you go ahead and you do the applications lamata, we view the lamala blood as if it's water. So Rava wants to suggest that the point of contention over here between the Rabbi Eliezer and the Rabbanon is whether or not you subscribe to the concept of rowan. Rabbi Eliezer clearly subscribes to it. The Rabbanon don't subscribe to it. Obabal lo pligi says, hold on. You're telling me that there's no machlokes by bila? Is that true? V'hatanya Rabbi Yehuda lo nechel Rabbi Eliezer v'chachamim adam chatos shenis ari b'dam ola sheyikrav. Yes, also we learned that what Rabbi Eliezer doesn't disagree with the chachamim, or there's no machlokes in the case of dam chatos that gets mixed in with dam ola. That in both of these cases, ultimately, what halacha l'maisa, you offer it up. Similarly, barova v'nirva, if you have regular carbonic blood, proper carbonic blood that gets mixed in with an animal that participated in immorality, shelo yikrav, that it's not offered up. So what's the machlokes? Aman nechleku, avdam tmima shenis arev b'dam balas mum. Interesting. The case over here is that what's the machlokes case? On when you have the blood of a perfectly fine sacrificial animal that gets mixed together with an animal that's a balmum. What do you do in this case? Rabbi Eliezer Omer Yikrav Bein Bebalul Bein Bekosos. Rabbi Eliezer holds, Rabbi Eliezer holds that you offer it up whether the bloods are mixed together, like actively mixed together in one utensil, or even if we're talking about a case of where there are cups of blood that gets mixed together. The Chum say do not offer it up. Now, boss, take a look at Rashi for just a moment. This is Rashi in the intermediate wide lines, second line in. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Yakriv, Rashi says over here, Va'afilu lo karav echad mehem. Va'afilo karv echa mehem, didarish mum bam lo yirtzu lachem be'enehu mashma ayidei ta'aroves yirtzu. So I will say we're going to get to this actually in just a little bit. Rabbi Eliezer paskins that halacha l'maisa, sacrificial blood retains its identity even in a mixture. Even a mixture retains its identity. Therefore, again, Rabbi Eliezer says that halacha l'maisa, that when you go ahead and you have that sacrificial blood, even if it's mixed in with other balmum blood, the sacrificial blood still retains its identity, and therefore you're good to go. On the other hand, the Chachamim hold you can't offer it up. Shabbos say this does make it sound like there is a machlokes of yesh bila or im bila. To which the Gemara says, Rabbi Huda aliba Rabbi Eliezer masni bein bebalul bein bekosos v'Rabbanan bekosos pligi. So Rabbi Huda, according to Rabbi Eliezer, understands that the machlokes or states the position whether it's by balul or whether it's by kosos, but the Rabbanan disagree in the case of kosos. Okay, so Rabbi say what comes out that kind of stops that mini sugya over here. But again, it turns out that really it still sounds like the machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim that we started with this price beforehand is still whether or not yesh bila or ein bila. That still seems to go ahead and factor into this, but there's really two parts of the machlokes, right? Yesh bila or ein bila is only machlokes ultimately again in terms of when the blood itself is mixed together. That's one case. Then there's a secondary case of where you have individual cups of blood. What happens in that scenario? Okay, so we'll say, so that's kind of, that stops over here. Just before we go on, I was just very intrigued by this paraduma case. So what is the halacha ultimately again when it comes to paraduma? In other words, if you have we'll call it mundane or regular water that gets mixed in with paraduma water, so what's the halacha? What's the halacha? What's the impact of that? So listen to this. So the Rambam in Hilchos Paraduma, Perek Tes Halacha Ches says as follows: Mayim mukdashin shenis arvu bohen mayim achirim kolshu. So this is the case. You have paraduma water and regular water gets mixed in. Afilu mayim shenis malu lekiddush. Now again, I both say, remember, how do you make paraduma? How do you make paraduma mixture? So remember again, you take the ash of the paraduma and what do you mix it with? Mayim chaim, right? Which is water from a source, well water, spring water, right? So now I have my paraduma water. The Rambam says, let's say for argument's sake, you have mayim chaim still. Any additional water that gets mixed in, hari elu psulin. The paraduma water is pasul. So both say, so we passing like the Chachamim, that if any foreign water gets mixed into the paraduma, but here's the chap of the Rambam, even if it was water that was originally drawn for the sake of paraduma. In other words, let's say I go to the well, I take mayim chaim, I take a bucket of mayim chaim, of spring water for the paraduma. I mix up the paraduma. I've got some water left over in my bucket. Even if some of that water falls into my paraduma mixture, ultimately, again, it is pasul. It is possible. Any foreign water that gets mixed in. Now, both say, by the way, get ready for this. This is why I don't even know. I'm not sure where these Gemaras are. I don't know where the para aduma is. I don't know where the Mishnah is. But I don't know the Gemara para aduma. Listen to this. This is wild. The chain is nothing with our Gemara. It's just this is bonus material. You're welcome. You're welcome. This is v'chein im yarad lesochan tal hare elu psulin. If dew falls into the para aduma water, it's pasul. It's pasul. So, which is fascinating, which tells you just the care and concern that they must have exhibited again with the para aduma. Ultimately, to take sure the water. The Rambam then goes on to a whole bunch of other cases about fruit juices, other things like that. Okay, or even moisture in the kli. But again, halacha l'maisa, we paskin like the chachamim. Now, interestingly enough. Okay, fine. There's a lot. I don't know why I just got caught up in paraduma yesterday. Halavai, we should be zocheh to it soon. Okay, fine. We'll leave the rest. We'll leave the rest. A lot of interesting stuff about the shir of Hazah. What did I want to show it to you over here? Okay, we'll leave the rest. So let's get back to the Gemara. Okay, anyway, so bottom line, halacha l'maisa, has like the chacham, and therefore any alien water, apparently even dew that gets mixed in with paraduma, ultimately again is going to negatively impact the mixture. Let's go back to Rabbi. So now, fascinating Gemara. Rabbi, lo shanu ella tchilas chatas va'ola. Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit. So take a look at Rashi for just a moment. This is Rashi in the longest lines. Second line in Lo Shanu, Hach Plugta, de Chatas Va'ola de Masnisin de La'el. Dami Rabbani Yishapech La'ama, Ella Tchilas Chatas. So remember again, here is the case. If you remember again in the Mishnah, we had the following situation. We had the case of where you had the blood of, let me find it in here, the blood of Chatas that gets mixed in with the blood of Ola. So if you remember again, what was the halacha? Actually, this is just the beginning of the Mishnah, right? So if the blood of Chatas gets mixed in with the blood of Ola, what's the halacha? The Chachamim say, pour it out. And Rabbi Eliezer says you could do the application. So look at that Rashi. Hach plukta de Chatas va'ola de masnisin de la'el, Tami Rabbana yishapech la'ama, Ella betchilas Chatas va'ola, shenis arvu lufnei matan damam. Bahi pasli Rabbanan de lesle roin, va'asr l'shanos es makoman, loses es ha'ola lemala minachot mipnei hechsher Chatas. So listen to this. So when you have the chatas and the ola mixed together. So remember again, the chachamim say, pour it out. And Rabbi Eliezer says, no, just do the blood applications in different places. What about the blood applications that are done in the wrong location? What's the problem? Or how do you deal with that? Rowing. So I'll say, so remember again, just to clarify this, when you have a chatas and an ola mixed together, what's the big problem over here? Let's analyze. What's our problem? Blood applications. Chatas goes lamala and ola goes lamata. So now everything is mixed together in the same cup, or for that matter, again, even different cups. Let's keep it simple. They're mixed together. How do I do the blood applications? So remember again, the Chachamim say you can't. So because they say you can't, just pour the whole thing out into the channel. It's just no good. Rabbi Eliezer says, yes, you can. But one second, I'm applying the collective mixture above. When I apply it above, what do I do about the fact that there may be ola blood in there? What's the answer? One word, rowan. What does rowan mean? We view any potential ola blood that's in there like it's water. Conversely, when you go ahead and you do the blood applications below, so halacha lamaisa again, what about the chatas blood? Potentially it's mixed in there. Rowan, we view it as if it's water. Rabbi Eliezer holds of rowan, Chacham the hold of rowan. Now, Abai qualifies this machlokes very interestingly. He says, Lo shon elu, where's this machlokes? Ela betchilas chatas va'ola. It's only what he calls the beginning of the app, meaning no blood applications have been done. That's where this machlokes is. Listen to this. Aval sof chatas va'ola, divrei hakol makam ola makam shirayim. This is wild. But I both say, let's say halacha l'maisa. Look at Rashi. Aval sof chatas. It's in the wide lines, fourth line down in the widest lines, the middle of the line. Aval sof chatas shenis arig b'tchilas ola. Shenis arvu shiari chatas b'tchilas ola in kamachlokes. So we'll say, what about the following case? Let's say you have chatas blood, and the blood application for the chatas was already done. So now, so we'll say, after you do the blood application with the chatas blood, what is the rest of the blood called? What is it called? Shirayim. So let's say you have shiare chatas that gets mixed in with ola blood. Okay? Shiare chatas, it's very exciting. Shiare chatas that gets mixed in with ola blood. Abaye says, listen to this, there's no machlokes. Why? This is going to blow your mind. Why not? Listen to this. He says, however, about sof chatas, he calls it sof chatas. Sof chatas means the primary blood applications have already been done. All I have is leftover chatas blood. So if leftover chatas blood gets mixed in with ola blood, divrei hakol, everyone says no problem. Why? Because makom ola, makom shirayim. Because what do I have here? Ola blood and shirayim blood. And guess what? Ola blood and shirayim blood go in the same place. Now both say, where is shirayim poured out? Okay, now here's what's interesting. Right? So Abaye is saying, pretty much, so a shirayim blood is poured out. It has to be poured out on the yesod, on the base. But Abaye says, it's also okay to apply it anywhere below the red line. Anywhere in the Matan Michal. Why? Because whatever you put on the bottom of this bech is going to what? Is going to trickle down onto the base. So therefore, again, this is fascinating. So therefore, the only machlokis is when there's been no blood applications yet, the blood of the chatas, the blood of the ola. But once you have shiare chatas that gets mixed in with ola blood, Abaye says, easy, because they both get applied on the same place, and therefore, halacha l'maisa, even the Chachamim would agree that ultimately you could do the blood application. Incredible. So the Gemara says, hold up. Amalei Rav Yosef, hold up. Hachi Amar Rav Yehuda, Shiyayim Tzrichim Itztava. It's not true. It's not true. Abaye, you are presupposing that shiarei chatas could just be applied anywhere on the lower part of the mizbeach, and they will drip down, ultimately again to the yesod. But that's not true. Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Yossi says, Rabbi Yehuda said that shirayim dafka have to be poured on the itztava. Now remember again, what's the itztava? We actually mentioned this. Itztava, remember again, is the flat part of the yesod. Remember again, the yesod extends out on two and a little bit sides of the mizbeach. So what it is it's a base, but it's a base that protrudes. The itztava is the flat part of the yesod. There's a flat part. So Rabbi Yehuda says, no, you can't apply shirayim on the bottom part of the mizbeach. Shirayim have to be applied on the flat part of the itztava. If that's the case, then even when leftover chatas blood gets mixed in with Ola blood, we still have a problem. V'chein amar Rav Shimon, see here this. V'chein amar Rav Shimon. Now, we'll say Rav Shimon seems to echo Abaye's idea. Lo shana el tchilas chadas va'ola. The machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim is only when you have what we'll call initial chatas blood that gets mixed in with initial Ola blood, meaning that the blood application for the chatas blood has not been done yet. That's when we have a problem. That's why there's machlokes. Aval sof chatas va'ola divrei hakol mokum ola mokum shirayim. But if you already did the blood application, so the chatos, and therefore all you have is shirayim chatos blood that gets mixed in with ola blood, easy, because they're both applied in the same place, or they both can be applied in the same place. The lower part of the mizbeach, that's where the ola blood belongs. The chatos blood doesn't belong there. Where does the chatos blood belong? Where does it belong? By the base, but no problem. Just apply it on the lower part of the wall of the mizbeach, and it'll trickle down. Rabbi Yochanan, V'iter Rabbi Eliezer, no, adayin hi machlokes. Not true. Not true, it's still a machlokes. So both say, this is amazing. So it turns out that now both say there is a dramatic machlokes about the proper placement of shirayim. Where does shirayim go? Now again, remember, before we got to this Gemara, and life was easy, right? Everything made sense at before 6 o'clock this morning, right? So I knew somebody would have stopped me on the way in. Where does shirayim go? I would have said, where does shirayim go? Yesod. And if somebody would have asked you, does everyone agree with that? You would have said, of course. And now comes along the Gemara and says, no, not everybody. Actually, it's machlokes. So what's the machlokes? Everyone agrees shirayim belongs on the yesod. The shaila is, what is the exact placement? So clearly, again, Abaye is suggesting, and sounds like, and Rabbi Shimon is also, or Rabbi Yehuda is also saying that, Rabbi Shimon is saying that halacha l'maisa, you could put shirayim anywhere on the lower part of the mizbeach, and it'll trickle down to where it needs to go, and you're good to go. Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that no, shirayim must be placed on the itztava, must be placed on the flat part, the flat ledge, ultimately again of the yesod. So dramatic machlokes. And I will say, obviously, that machlokes is going to impact the machlokes of Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim in the Mishnah. So Master Rav Huna Bar Yehuda, incredible. Master Rav Huna Bar Yehuda, Kodesh Heim. So we'll say, so now watch what's going to happen over here. And actually, this is a very important Gemara that's coming up now. They're all important Gemaras. Master Rav Huna Bar Yehuda, Kodesh Heim. The pasuk says they shall be sanctified. Kodesh Heim. So the Gemara says, if you look at Rashi says over here that just the pasuk in its entirety is Ach Bechar Shar, Ar Bechar Kesev, O Bechar Eiz. This is talking about Bechar animals. Lo Sifte, you can't redeem them. Kodesh Heim. You cannot redeem them. They are Kodesh. As Damam Tizrak Al Mizbeach, sprinkle their blood on the Mizbeach. As Chalbam Taktir Isha L'Reich Nichach LaHashem. Now look at Rashi for just a moment. This is in the widest lines, about 8 lines up from the bottom. Kodesh Heim. Bechar Ksiv. So this pasuk is written by Bechar, firstborn animal. Umashmolei Hein Bahavyasam Yehu Shimnis Arvu B'Damim Achirim Lo Avdu Es Shmam V'Yikravu. So what says, we're going to see, I'm just reading this Rashi first to give you just the intro. This pasuk is going to be one of the sources that when sacrificial blood gets mixed in with other sacrificial bloods or other blood, ultimately sacrificial blood retains its identity and doesn't become batal. So again, and the Gemara is going to dash it from the lashon of Kodesh Heim. They are Kodesh. They remain Kodesh. Okay, so again, fine. So let's go back to the Gemara. So Master Rav Huna raises the kasha, Kodesh Heim. So again, what does this teach me? That by blood of a bachar, Shemnis Arev Badam Kotshim Acherim Yikravu. That halacha, what does it teach me? That if blood of a bachar gets mixed in with other sacrificial bloods, ultimately, again, you can still offer it up. So the Gemara says, what's the case? What's the case of where you could still offer up sacrificial blood even though it gets mixed in with other forms of sacrificial blood? So here it is, get ready for it. So the Gemara says, My lav sof ola ubachar. It must be talking about where you've done the primary applications of ola. So what do you have? You have ultimately shirayim of ola and blood of a bachar. And the halacha is that you could offer up both of those bloods. Why? Because bepashtas, they go in the same place. Because the shiraim of the ola could be placed on the lower part of lamata, and the blood of bachar can be placed lamata. Ushmamina makam ola makam shirayim. And what do you see from here? That shirayim and ola could be placed in the same area, which is lamata. So what do you see from here? Shirayim does not need to be placed on the itztava. All you have to do with shirayim is pour it anywhere on the lower part of lamata michot circle, below the red line, and you're good to go. To which Gemara says, no, lo tchilas ola ubachar. Not necessarily. It could be talking about, again, we're both saying what we call tchilas ola. Tchilas ola just means no blood applications have been done for the ola. So really, in other words, initial blood of ola and bachar. Umay kamash malan. So what is the Gemara teaching us? De'ein olin mevatlin ze'edzeh. It's teaching us that sacrificial bloods do not negate one another. That's what it's teaching me. That Allah say again, nothing. That when you have sacrificial bloods that are mixed together, they are not mevatel each other. The Gemara says, hold up. Hi, that's not the source for that halacha. In other words, I agree that that's the halacha, but this is not the source. Hi, mivelakach dam hapar umidam hasar nafka. This is so exciting. The Gemara says, no. The source for the fact that sacrificial bloods do not negate one another is actually learned that from a different source. Where's learned that from? Yom Kippur. Because Rabbi said the Kohen Gadol does something very interesting on Yom Kippur. And what does he do? He goes ahead and, remember again, he shechts a par and he shechts a sa'ir, a goat. Right? And now after their individual blood service is done, he mixes the two bloods together. Now obviously, there's a lot more blood from a par than there is from a sa'ir. But even though, again, there's rov dam par, yet the blood does not negate each other. So from here you see that sacrificial bloods, when they are mixed together, do not negate one another. That's the source for this halacha. Rashi says over here, Mivalakach tamapar v'dam aser, 4 lines up from the bottom. Ba'kometz rabba, shema arvin dam par v'dam ser, shema kippurim b'matan dam kronos hamizbeach, hapnimi. So remember again, interestingly enough, you mix the bloods together in order to apply them on the corners of the interior mizbeach, which is actually mostly something very unique about Yom Kippur, that there's blood. This is not the only time, because we have chatas panimi, but Yom Kippur is one of the times where there's a chatas panimi, where we do blood applications on the interior mizbeach. And everyone knows there's more dam par than dam soyer. So what do you see from here? You see from here that halacha lamaisa, sacrificial blood that is mixed together, does not negate one another. So we learn it from Yom Kippur, not from Bachar. To which the Gemara says, Tanoihi, it's machlokes Tanoim, Ike denafkale mehacha, Vike denafkale mehacha. So Rabbi say, this is an interesting machlokes Tanoim. In this machlokes Tanoim, interestingly enough, no one is arguing about the halacha. What are they arguing about? The source. The source. So everyone will agree that halacha l'maisa, sacrificial blood, do not negate one another. They argue on what the source for that halacha is. Okay, we'll come back to that. So the Gemara says, Masiv Rava. Rava raised the kasha. V'krivo b'nei Aaron es hadam v'zarko es hadam. So the pasuk says, so we'll say, so what is this pasuk by? If you look at Rashi, Rashi says over here, 3 lines up from the bottom, V'krivu v'zarko, matam lo dandam, gabe olakoi. So we'll say, so this is talking about carbon ola. The pasuk is v'shachat as ben abakar. So let me just say the problem with the pasuk. So v'shachat as ben abakar lefnei Hashem, v'krivu b'nei Aaron ha'kohanim es hadam, v'zarko es hadam al mizbeach saviv. So we'll say, the pasuk says, they'll shecht the cow, right? They'll offer up, the kohanim will offer up the dam, V'zarko es adam, and they will sprinkle the blood. Now that second mention of dam is really unnecessary, because once you tell me ultimately again, v'krivu b'nei Aaron ha'kohanim es hadam, that they're going to bring the dam close to the mizbeach. Just say what? Just say v'zarko, and they'll sprinkle it. You don't have to say v'zarko es hadam. You don't have to say that. I understand. There's no other carbonic material that we're discussing in this pasuk. So the subject already is dam. So once you tell me that they're bringing it close to the mizbeach, just say v'zarko and they sprinkle it, and there's no need to say anything else. So the Gemara says, "Ma tamud lomer amud beis Rabbi say amud beis. Ma tamud lomer dam dam. Why do you have to repeat dam twice in the pasuk? Listen to this. Shiyachol, because you would have thought, ein li ela elu shenis arva b'timurasa. I'm going to thought like this. Maybe the halacha ultimately, again, that when a carbon gets mixed in with something else that doesn't lose its identity, is only talking about an ola, because by an ola, ultimately, again, even shenis arva b'timurasa, if let's say you made a tamura means, remember again, about say you want to swap out your original carbon for another carbon, that is illegal. You're not allowed to do that. And if you do, in fact, do that, there's a penalty. What's the penalty? Vayahu usmuraso kodesh laHashem. Both animals ultimately become consecrated to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So you might have thought like this. Yachol, ainli ela elu, shenis arva b'timurasa. I would have thought that this halacha that retains its identity only applies to an ola, because in an ola case, even if it got mixed up with its timura, sha'af mechayim tikarev. Even if the animal was alive, you're still allowed to offer up all of these karbanos. Take a quick look at Rashi before we go on. Rashi says, Yachol einli ela shenis arvu be'elu. The kamar binon, it's the last of the wide lines on top. The kamar binon minei diyikravu shekin ta'aruvasan re'uya likarev afilu nis arva behema bebehem mechayim. Now, ola is unique because halacha l'maisa, even if an ola got mixed up with other olos while the animal was alive, you're still allowed to proceed, shecht, and offer them up. The ha'ola bitmura, O ola ba'ola acheres tinab masis and kadshim bekadshim min b'mino zeh yikra l'shem mishu v'zeh yikra l'shem mishu v'chei minis arva b'chulun tmimin tinan la'el yimach, we saw this already before, yimachru achulun tzarche osa amin v'hadar havelu kadshim bekadshim min b'mino afilu nis ariv b'dam asham yikrubu v'afa pi she'eno mino. So again, I would have known this halacha applies to ola, because ola we've already seen, even if living animals gets mixed in with one another, ultimately again halacha l'maisa, you can still offer it up. So the Gemara says, Minayin the Rabbos, told the Ushlamim, third line of Rabbi on Pe'af and base 81b. How do I know to also include, ultimately again, told in Shlamim? Mar ba'ani told Shlamim shebayid b'neder nadava kamosa. So I would include ultimately told in Shlamim in the category of Ola. Why? Because just as an Ola ultimately can become as a neder or a nedava, so too again, told in Shlamim can also come as a neder or a nedava. Minayin the Rabbos as ha'asham. How do I know to include asham? So mar ba'ani as ha'asham, shetaon matan dalad kimoso. I include asham in the category as well. Why? Because asham is similar to ola in that it requires 4 blood applications. Bechar u'maiser u'pesach minayin. How do I know to include bechar, maiser, and carbon pesach? Talmud lomar dam. Because I learned that from dam. So again, that whole limud, remember again, was only to show why do I need dam, right? Why I need the repetition of dam? So dam comes to really expand the karbanos that are included in this principle as espoused by this pasuk. My love. Now again, remember. So once again, the Gemara is talking about a case where sacrificial blood is mixed with each other, and yet again, the sacrificial blood retains its identity, right? And it can be offered up together. So the Gemara says, what's the case? My love, sof ola ubachar. Are we not talking about a case of sof ola? Now, what's sof ola? Sof ola means the primary blood applications have already been done. So you have shirayim of ola left over with bachar. And now the Gemara is telling me that what? Those can be offered up together. And Abba say, why could they be offered up together? Shma mina, makam ola, makam shirayim. Why? Because again, what am I seeing from here? That shirayim is placed in the same place as the ola. Where's the ola placed? Lamata. So to Shirayim is placed Lamata. And what do you see from here? That Shirayim does not require itztiva. Rather, again, where does Shirayim go? Anywhere below the Chota Sikra. Anywhere below the red line is good for Shirayim. Shirayim says, Lo, Tchilas Ola Ubachar. Not true. It's actually talking about a case of Tchilas Ola. No blood applications of the Ola have been done. So therefore, again, it's Tchilas Ola Bachar. The Gemara says, okay. Now again, I will say, now remember, Tchilas Ola Bachar, what's the big chiddush in that? Umay Kamash Malon, what is it teaching us? Here it is. De'ein Olin Mevatlin Ze'edzeh. Once again, another source that seems to point to the same principle, that what? Mixed together sacrificial blood do not negate one another. The Gemara says, 1 second. The Gemara says, I don't understand. But 1 second, we already have a source for that. Where's the source for that? Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, we just said before that what happens by Yom Kippur, the Kohen takes the leftover blood of the sire, the leftover blood of the par, and mixes it together and then does an interior blood application. That teaches us that when sacrificial blood are mixed together, they do not nullify each other. So I don't need this pasuk. To which the Gemara says, you're right. Tanoihi. It's a machlokes tanoim. Ika denafka lemehacha, v'ika denafka lemehacha. Some learn it out from here, some learn it from here. So it turns out, fascinatingly enough, everyone agrees with the same principle, which is sacrificial blood will not negate one another. Will not negate one another. What's the machlokes? What's the source? And it turns out, Rabbi said that there are really three sources for this, right? One source ultimately, again, is going to be Bachar. One source is going to be Ola. And a third source is going to be Yom Kippur. So three different sources for the same rule. The Gemara says, now the Gemara just says, now whenever you have something like this simple follow-up question of the Gemara is, so why doesn't everyone agree with the other sources? So here we go. So the Gemara says, this is one of these beautiful Gemaras where, again, everyone is agreeing. Now, what I want to point out is, let's finish this up first. V'hani Tanoi, so the Gemara says, good. V'hani Tanoi, mivelakach midam apar midam asar lo yalfi. So we'll say, so the other two opinions, they don't like to learn out from Yom Kippur, right? Why not? Kasavri in ma'arvin lekranas. Because Rabbi say this is actually fascinating, and this is a different discussion. A whole other machlokes. Now, we've been working on this sugya, presupposing that when the kohen finishes his individual blood avodos for the sar and the par, he then mixes the leftover bloods together and then does a collective blood application on the interior mizbeach. That's machlokes. That's machlokes. Everyone agrees that there are blood applications on the interior mizbeach, but there's machlokes. Do you independently apply the blood of the par, the blood of the sire, or do you mix them together and then do a collective application? That's a machlokes. So therefore, again, Abba say, Yom Kippur is only a proof if you hold that the bloods are combined. But the other opinions hold the bloods are not combined. So because of that, they don't learn out from Yom Kippur. Good. The Gemara says, midam dam lo yalif. Why do the other opinions reject the limud ultimately from Ola? Yalif, the Gemara says, midam dam lo yalif, dam lo mashmalahu. Because they don't subscribe to that drush of dam dam. They don't feel that the extra dam is an extra word. Ella, the Gemara says, mikodesh. My time in Yalfi. Why not learn it out from Bachar? That was the first limud. Kasavar kodesh he makrivin ve'in tmurasan kreva. They learn out for a different halacha. They say kodesh he teaches us a din by Bachar. What's the din by Bachar? That by Bachar only the Bachar animal is offered up, but its tumura is not offered up. Okay, so the Gemara says v'idach. So where does the other opinion, right, that uses kodesh heim as the source for the fact that sacrificial blood do not negate each other? Where does that opinion learn out that the tmura of a bachar is not vested with kedusha, not offered up? V'idach nafkelei me'im shar imse la shemhu. He learns out from the phrase, right? If it's a shor or if it's a says for Hashem. Hu karev vein tmura so kreva. Ultimately teaches us that only the actual bachar animal is offered up, but the tmura of a bachar is not offered up. Incredible. Let's go back there. So Tashma, Nasan Lamala V'Nol Nimlach. So we'll say, remember again, this is actually interesting. This is talking about by the Mishnah as well. Remember again, the Mishnah always gave two sets of halachas about like if the blood gets mixed together, what you're supposed to do, and then what happens if the kohen proceeds without asking. Right? So what's the halacha? So the Gemara says, Tashma Nasan Lamala V'Nol Nimlach. Let's say the kohen did the blood application of the combined blood, Lamala, without asking. Elu v'elu modim sheyachzer v'yitin lamata. Everyone agrees that halacha l'maisa, he has to go ahead and do another blood application below. Now, Rashi says over here, Nasalam alav lo nimlach. It's in the short lines, about the 12 lines up from before it gets wide. Masnisin de palik be Rabbi Eliezer v'Rabbanan b'nitanen lamala shnis arva b'nitanen lamata. So this is a case again of where lamala blood gets mixed together with lamata blood. Kohen does the blood application lamala without asking. So in that case, everyone agrees that Allah Chalamayis should do another blood application lamata. So the Gemara says, and elu v'elu olanlo, and both work. It's fascinating. So ex post facto, even the Rabbanan will agree with this. Chum will agree with this. My love, the arev chatas va'ola. Are we not talking about a case where chatas and ola blood got mixed together? The chayvin di'av leila ma'ala havalu shirayim. And since you did the blood application above, that means the rest of the chatas blood that is now in this mixture is now what? Is now shirayim. And that's why the katani elu ve'elu modim sheyachzer v'yitin lamata. And that's why, again, everyone agrees that you can take the rest of that mixture and apply it lamata. And what do you see from here? Shmamina makom ola makom shirayim. That where do shirayim go? Shirayim go in the same place as the ola. Where does the ola go? lemata. Shirayim is placed in the same area, and therefore, what does that show us? That halacha lemaisa, Shirayim need not go on the itztaba. Rather, again, halacha lemaisa, Shirayim could go below the chut hasikra. Kiyasa Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yosef Amra Ma'arava Hachama Askinon. No, what's the case? Kegom di Ariv Chatas Hachitzona b'Shirayim. No, actually, the case over here is where halacha lemaisa, the blood of a chatas. Listen to this. This is another wrinkle in this whole thing, right? The blood of the outer chatas, this is fascinating, gets mixed in with the shirayim of the blood of an inner chatas pnimi. So again, making this a bit more complicated. But why? I don't understand why do you have to set it up like that? Why not just set it up as a case where ultimately, again, the leftover. Why not set it up with a case of where it gets mixed in with the shirayim of a chatas chitzoni, an outer chatas? Why does that have to be an inner chatas? Dilma hakamash malan. Maybe it's going to teach us the following halacha. That's what. Ultimately, even according to the opinion that says that Shirayim are ma'akvin. Rabbi said, now what does that mean? Remember again, this is a little bit of chazar from the past. Shirayim ma'akvin, Rabbi said, was a machlokes of, is the application or the pouring out of the Shirayim a necessary part for the carbonic process or not? That was a machlokes. So maybe even according to the opinion that says Shirayim are ma'akvin, chasru ein ma'akvin. If you're missing some of the shirayim blood, that's not ma'akev. Amalei Ravato Svala Ravina, ho kimna hi beruba el yonim. V'kayov lemala shir tachtona va'od. The way we set up this case is in this mixture of blood. The majority of blood ultimately again is al yonim blood, and ours lemala blood, and ultimately again you place the shear ultimately again of the tachtonim in a little bit. That's what we saw in yesterday's daf. Amalei hani mili leman damru meikara ein bila. Maskana bekosos pligi. That answer was true ultimately again according to the opinion that said ein bila. Again, Abba said this is time back to the beginning of the daf. But Allah Chalamaysa, our maskana is that the machlokes is not in bila. Rather, what was the machlokes? The machlokes ultimately again was in the case of kosos. So Abba say. So therefore again, okay, fine. So again, we end up with this machlokes. We're not going to have time to do the Rambam today. But again, it's going to tell you what's outstanding and what we'll pick up with tomorrow. So the two pieces of information that are outstanding is obviously the general machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim in the Mishnah. That Allah Chalamaysa, again, in these cases of mixture, where the Chachamim says Yishpoch la'ama, pour it out into the channel, and ultimately again, Rabbi Eliezer says, no, do the blood applications. Why? Now, why does Rabbi Eliezer offer the blood applications? Why? Because he subscribes to the principle of Rowan. So issue number one that we have to figure out, we'll do this first thing tomorrow, is do we subscribe to the concept of Rowan or not? That's issue number one. And what's piece number two? Is this Shirayim piece. Do Shirayim have to be placed on the itztaba, or is it enough to place Shirayim ultimately again on the lower part of the kira, of the mizbeach, lamata, and know that they'll trickle down? Machlokes as well. Resolution of those two pieces will be first thing tomorrow morning. Rabbi Say, shkoyach. Have a great day, everyone.